Welcome to the Get Real Sisters podcast. We're sisters, each other's biggest supporter and confidant. We keep it real with each other, just like we're going to keep it real with you, with discussions about life, the good, the bad, and in between. We're here to grow and get real. So don't forget to subscribe and share. Let's go.
It's your girl, Jazz, from the Get Real Sisters podcast.
And Shanice. We are back with yet another episode number 5, right? 5?
Yep.
All right. Episode number 5. And this is actually a suggestion from one of you. We'll keep names disclosed because we may or may not be able to pull this person in to be a guest, so stay tuned. But yeah, Jazz, if you want to get into what the topic is, and we'll get this conversation started.
Yeah. Which I think it just really it speaks volume to what we're doing here, naturally about communication, but heavily focusing on perspective. How your perspective, whether positive or negative, can basically trigger or negatively impact your outcome. Specifically, when I say negative, if we focus, let's say your perspective on any given situation, you enter your perspective, your experience is negative, and you go in with that thought, how it can roll down the road of continuing to be negative, and vice versa. If you go into a situation with a positive outlook, how it could end up being a positive situation. Now, let me clear the air right here. We're not saying 100% of the time that's what it's going to be. You can have both, a mixture, right? You might go in positive and it end up negative, right? Or vice versa. So we're not saying that, but again, we just want to focus on how your perspective can truly kind of work its way or set its own path unknowingly, right?
Right. As well as communication, because
yes.
Your perspective can also trigger how you respond to certain things and how you interpret how other people are coming off, like even if that's not even how they mean to. So both communication wise and the overall outcome based on what your personal perspective is, where you came from in life. I think there's quite a few things that can impact it, but we'll definitely share what our thoughts are regarding the communication outcome piece. I know for me, I've definitely, as you get older, it's the age-old thing of like you should have listened to your parents, like or the people of wisdom in your life that when you're younger, you're like, no, like I'm not about to listen to you because I'm gonna do my own thing, and I'm gonna be so much better, greater. Those things aren't gonna happen to me. Meanwhile, I believe it was Einstein who said this: the definition of insanity is doing the exact same thing and expecting different results.
Yep.
So I definitely ran into my past, intentional or not, where I was repeating behaviors that I grew up around that put me in a real bad space mentally, physically, financially, emotionally. Like, check off the boxes because specifically speaking regarding relationships, when this subject came to me, my thought went straight to us growing up, and to be frank, our parents aren't together. There's additional children that has happened, different relationships that have happened. And for the most part, not every single one of them. Last two set parents, we shouted y'all out last time. They were winners, but there were other relationships where there was a lot of repetitive negative behavior that we were just exposed to. So our exposure as children, even though as children we're all like, oh, we're never gonna do this, we're never gonna live like this. My first few relationships, whether I believed it or not, I was gravitating to people that mirrored that toxic energy that I grew up around. I was falling for people or allowing people that didn't deserve my time or my energy to put me in places that, like I said, put me in bad spaces financially, bad spaces mentally, where it took me probably a lot longer to be able to accept someone like my husband who, he still gets on my nerves, so it ain't peaches and creams out every day over here. But to appreciate someone who is, you know, about his business, who definitely loves me, and make sure most of his actions, the unintentional ones, different topic, different day, but his intentional actions are for the betterment of me and our family, you know what I mean? So it just, you don't think about those things sometimes until you're way past that. Like years later, I'm like, dang, like if I really was paying attention, or if these conversations were way more normal growing up, could have avoided a lot of heartache, headache, all that.
Yeah. I think you touched on a lot of big things when it comes, right? Like with perspective, it goes back to your experience, right? Like your experience, how your upbringing, a lot of childhood steps. But you just mentioning on that last part about if there were conversations, right? Prior. And I don't know why my mind just went there, but it did. And I think just because I've been thinking about the children, the perspective of, and I was just reading a recent article on LinkedIn, come on reading, but it was specifically about allowing children to express themselves. And growing up, and I'm going to hone in on boys turning into men. So I want to ask, and this is related to what you said, but what is your perspective about children expressing their emotions? Or let me say a phrase. The phrase of stop crying, or you know, you sound like a girl. Stop acting like a girl, rather. What is your perspective with those kind of statements in general?
Yeah, I hate them. Yeah, my perspective is that it can be really detrimental. Like there was so many decades of males that push that narrative of men don't cry, men don't show their emotions, men have to be strong, this, that, and the third. But I feel like it developed a lot. And again, not saying that these men aren't great people and can take care of what they need to take care of, but I feel like the lack of emotion creates even more of a disconnect between their partner. We're already so different as men and women. You know what I mean? So to add that you can't really relate to our emotional side because of that distance, like, you know, Tidy, I feel like definitely was raised that way. He shows his emotions sometimes, but it's definitely not very hardcore, I would say. And then there's sometimes where he's talking to Kingston and he's like, you know, stop being a crybaby or stop crying and stuff. And I'm like, he's two. Like, that's the way he can express himself. That's the way. And so, you know, mom in the back, I'm like, it's okay, Kingston.
Yep.
It's okay to be sad. It's okay to cry when you're actually physically hurt. Like, it ties into how, like, the different outcomes. Like Tidy was raised in a way by a man, or having heavily his dad involved, that showed him that you shouldn't be as emotional. I don't know if shouldn't is the right word, but you shouldn't be as emotional. You have things to take care of. You got your family, blah, 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 take care of your business. And then we're raising the next generation. So his outcome, he's very strong, very, very, what is the word? Logistical? Is that a right word?
Sure, that is a word.
Let us know in the comments if that's a real word. But you know, just, I don't know. So I feel like so focused on the here, the now reality, where my outcome of our parents kind of giving us more of that freedom to speak, to be emotional if we wanted to be emotional, and maybe also the fact that we're females. I have more of like a dreamer mindset and more of an accepting mindset to be like, no, like that's cool. You're able to feel that way because it's valid. We'll work on the ways that we can translate this into real words, Kingston, or being able to describe your emotions differently or better. But I can't stand it. I don't think in this day and age, best outcome is for men to continue to do that. Like you need some type of balance. Maybe it's not 50-50, but some type of balance to be able to relate to humanity.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more. I think I know we are on the same page when it comes to this topic. But the other day when I was reading this article, and just like trying to tie it into like who I am and what I do, I would, if you were to ask me, Jasmine, okay, what is your perspective? Again, spot on with what you said. Like, I believe anyone and everyone, especially the boys, need to be able to, and men need to be able to express themselves freely. But due to a lot of the men's upbringing, that just wasn't a platform, right? But I also found that I was like, wait a second, Jazz, you kind of contradict that. And why I'm saying that, and I know you're very familiar, but those out there, my godchildren, my niece, my nephew, all of them, anyone, anyone that's crying, I immediately am, no, that's not what we're doing. That's not what we're doing. Talk it through, right? And it's so, where I'm saying is that I don't mean to, but I can see how the way that I respond to the children crying could come across of like, you're not letting me express my emotions. And in reality, all I'm really, at the end of the day, I'm trying to say to them is, I need you to talk it through so I can understand the emotion, right? You crying, I'm not understanding, but at the same time, like I said, I'm kind of shielding them from letting it out.
Yeah, because it's like you're creating that outcome of them either being afraid to
right.
share their emotions or just not fully share.
Right.
Yeah. It's so hard because in the moment, like, do you feel like in the moment, it's like, so obviously things like whining and crying, like it's
right.
grating, especially if you had a long day or whatever, and you're just trying to get it to stop. So that's like the easiest, fastest way to just dead whatever is going on versus, like you said, what you really mean to say is, I need you to express how you're feeling differently than this.
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of both too. Like you said, the noise, I can't stand. It's loud, like, right? I can't stand, whether it's crying or just yelling. Oof, it just grinds my gears. Also contradicts sometimes because when I get a little angry, my voice might get a little elevated, but we're not talking about that. So I don't like the noise of loudness. But also I just always want everyone and anyone in my space or who I'm talking with to know that they have this platform for them to openly and honestly communicate without being judged, right?
Yeah. But I mean, honestly, I think that just is one of those things where maybe they just never had that space.
Right.
I mean, we're not even, we don't even need to be talking on a child's level.
Right.
Maybe they never had that space, so they're not accustomed to that. So they don't even know from their perspective how they grew up, how to say something differently, how to act differently, which unfortunately is going to put people back in those repetitive cycles until you really take a step back to be like, whoa, like I am driving myself insane. I am doing the same thing that I learned and grew up and have been around for so long, but I'm stuck here.
Exactly. Yep. And so even in the digging a little bit deeper, and I don't want to, because we will circle back to the perspective and outlook. I was digging a little bit deeper into it because I'm like, okay, Jess, well, but furthermore, outside of like, you can't stand the noise. You want people to be able to use their words to express. Sometimes that's just not the way people can express. What is it really like, right? I was asking myself the whys, right? I was getting into my whys. And when I got to the root of it, and just as I'm growing a little bit more, is understanding I don't like, and I'm sure none of us really do, but truthfully, there's something in me. I'm wired a little crazy. Any emotion outside of being happy, I have a real tough time with processing. And so anything I can do to immediately dismiss the feeling of sadness, pain, anything, I'm going to do that. And consciously now being aware, I'm somewhat forcing that on to other people too, which toxic a little.
I mean, I actually can really relate to that too, because especially like I've told you guys, like with my job training people, I deal with so many different personalities and different walks of life. They live in different areas of the country. They, grew up different than me. And I'm not saying, because obviously there's people that out here know me and they may see me as almost like a dark persona. I don't know. What are the people that know me? What are your perspective about me? Because I feel like maybe not so much in my life now, but I used to have a darker mindset.
Can
And
you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by dark?
um like more pessimistic. I can't talk today.
I know, I'm like, girl, you usually on point.
Yeah, opposite of optimistic. I can say that word. Pessimistic. I don't know. I'm struggling. But that, or my face looked more angry all the time, resting B face. That's like the top two that come to my mind. Just like
Okay.
not looking at the best case scenario, worst case scenario, and it almost translated into my body language. I guess that would be the best way to say, like, whatever my thoughts were in my head, it translated into my body language. I was pretty closed off. People didn't, necessarily come to me with things, or not realize that I was actually an open person before they started initiating a conversation with me. Which now, because I feel like I'm very similar to you, where I flipped that mindset and I'm like, I gotta be more positive, even if I'm not necessarily feeling it all the time. As soon as a negative thought comes in my head, I actually learned this from your self-love class, where we were doing like, if you had a negative thought, you would just have to write a sentence that was the opposite of it. So I really like that activity, and I still do that even if it's just in my head. I don't know. I can't even think of an example, but maybe, this class is really stressing me out. This class is so negative. I'm handling this class with as much grace as I can. And they're new, they're learning, this is normal. Like, doesn't have to be all super shiny and rainbows on the other side, but it still flipped it to where I'm not focusing on the stressful part and just how, their emotions may be, because I have to put myself in their shoes. And that's the shift of your perspective.
Yep.
I feel like the best way that we can communicate and or change our outcomes is shifting your perspective from what it was. If you don't like where you were or the eyes you were looking out from, you got to do some reading. You want to read a book, watch a documentary, listen to a podcast, something that is geared to whatever type of mindset you're trying to have.
Yeah. I think that's it. I love how you just touched on the shifting too of your perspective, because just thinking of like anything, right? Whatever topic that we could touch on tonight, or in general when we go live with everyone. Okay, what is your perspective? Like, clear as day, like, you need to establish what is your perspective about this, right? And okay, what outcome are you looking for, or is desirable for you? And if that outcome does not mirror your perspective or your past experiences, you need to shift your perspective, and how do you do that? I believe, talking to others, gaining their perspective and experiences, understanding where they're coming from, right? And tapping into that, again, desirable outcome. Talk to the folks that already have that.
That's a good one.
Do they have it? Also, let me just back up on that, because we know when we broadcast or post and share, it's most of the time not all, would you use earlier, peaches and cream, right? We show what we want to, so the outcome might not be what you, like, in your mind you really think it is. So but yeah, that shift, I think that shifting piece was huge, to know that. And it's okay for you to shift. I highly encourage.
And know that it's not going to be an overnight process either.
Exactly.
Especially when these things have been built up over years. It's like, it's going to take some time, hopefully not additional, like, even more years for that shift to happen. But little by little, it's like, I think the mind is such a crazy, crazy thing. I forget what this doctor's name was, but I was listening to a podcast, and this doctor presented scientific data that was like, you can literally rebuild the neuron pathways in your brain by changing how you think.
I believe it.
By tricking your brain into having, just say, a bunch of positive things. I'm beautiful, I'm healthy, I'm strong, I'm fit. You think, obviously I'm talking about myself, but
Come on.
I'm successful in, whatever field. Even if you're not yet there,
Yep.
you are telling your brain to start firing neurons that are like, oh, we're going to act like this.
Yep.
We're about to do this. Oh, I wake up at 5 a.m., maybe eventually 5 a.m. to work out every morning. Like, you are retraining your brain, and it literally physically changes the way your brain is set up. And that, speaking of my mind, it blew my mind, because I was just like, I never thought it would get that deep. Because, we think of these like thoughts, perspective, our points of view as these like abstract things that our brain just does, but it goes deeper into the physicality of our brain matter.
Yep. Yeah. It's so funny, because I was just trying to think too of something recent that I have shifted, and I feel like because I've been able to tell myself, I firmly believe on what you're saying, and you saying like there's stats out there, like it's legit, it is. One big thing for me that I would say for my goddamn whole entire life, basically from past experiences, blah blah blah, my perspective, I went in with the notion of it being super positive. What am I referring to is independence. And I think with anything and everything, right? If you have too much of it, you're gonna bang yourself up. Now, scaling it back, right, from our past, just seeing as just women figures, whether they weren't doing too hot or they really were killing the game, I perceived it. And the way that I work through life was, oh, I'm gonna be independent. Okay, I don't need no one in their mother, nothing, no man, nothing. And then I add on top, of course, your girl being single for like years on eons. I was like, I got this, right? Like, I don't, like, I'm actually really good. I felt really good in my space. I felt good with the way things are moving. Things were gravy. So then people are like, okay, Jazz, well, it seems like you're getting the outcome, right? That you want. Your perspective is that women should be independent and carry their own and move through life, and they're going to be happy, right? So I'm getting, and I think this goes back to what I was saying before, is sometimes the outcome isn't all peaches and cream. So to say that, like, right, I'm good, but then more recently I had to scale back where I'm like, independence is solid, right? Like, again, I know what I can carry, but I also know the benefit of having, or what's the word I'm looking for? I'm going to use just scaling back a little bit, is just, I know the power and the beauty of scaling back. Like, right, I don't have to be so independent to handle all of this, because also with that independence comes these expectations that you set for yourselves, stress, aggravation, like unwanted and unwarranted, because I'm holding this, chip on my shoulder, really.
Right. I got to do it all. So,
Yes.
yeah.
So it's like, yes, I was getting what I want, quote unquote, wanted, but in reality, I feel like I was taking on way more than I needed to. So I shifted. Come on, shifted. I shifted my focus, and I was telling myself, I don't want to say I wasn't like, Jazz, I need a man to come in and do all this for me. That wasn't what it was. For me, I believe in, higher power. I believe in God. So I was, praying of, God, please enter, and not just a man. I said, please open my eyes to relationships in my life that will help me balance it out of independence, and because I don't want to be fully independent. I don't also want to be codependent, right? I don't want to do that. So, and by me doing that, by shifting, using my words, being very clear, and detailed, that's exactly what is starting to unfold in my life, right? Is that God is positioning and putting people in my life that are helping me acknowledge that you're gonna be good, right? I'm getting the actual desired outcome. I feel like I felt like I knew what I wanted my outcome to be, aka everyone and their mother, I'll use that again, knows your girl will handle it, and got it done. That's what I thought I wanted. And in reality now it's like, no, I want peace, I want love, I want understanding, I want balance.
Mhm.
And come through, right? Like before it wasn't, those things weren't even a thought. So
Yeah.
um
I really like that. Also, while you were talking too, it made me think of how shifts of perspective um can come very unexpectedly as well.
yes.
Yes, I think like me and Jasmine, like we really push hard about the work you need to do. So it's not that you don't need to do any work, but I think the other side of this is sometimes it takes an external something or other, a person, an activity, event, life event, whatever, that shifts it for you.
Yes.
And then you're like, oh, dang, like I didn't even realize that's what I was doing to myself. I didn't realize that I needed this. Um, you know, so I think that's also something, and that can probably be a whole nother podcast, but it's it's crazy to think that like for me, I was thinking as you were describing your difference in perspective, how you wanted that, you prayed for the shift. I feel like mine was almost opposite, at least with me and Tidy, and even having my kids. Like I don't know if I've shared with you all, but my family, my closest people knew I planned on being single for my whole life and having a cat. That was the only two things on my list. And I do think everything happens for a reason. So God was like, no, let me show you this different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Gave me Layla. He was like, I'm gonna show you that you can be this other person. And Layla, she still teaches me a lot of things because that girl's too smart. But she showed me a lot about the growth that I needed, but also shifting my perspective into like, no, like I don't necessarily need to be alone. Maybe that was a defense mechanism because of the things I was seeing so far in the relationships that I knew, that it was going to be easier to be alone. But she was like, nope, I'm going to show you that you don't need to be alone because hello, I'm here permanently. And then two, that you can be a mom. And after that, then came Tidy. Like Tidy came in and shifted my perspective into me now wanting to become a wife, and then having another kid, and it's just really, really crazy to look back on that.
Yes.
How many years? Hold on, how old am I again? Almost
Oh,
20 years ago. I was thinking to myself that marriage and children were not in my cards. I purposely was trying to set my life up to avoid those things. And life, the little butterfly that causes the tsunami, hit me with, nope, we're doing a switch up. And I really couldn't be happier. Like, I mean, we could all be a little bit happier probably, but I'm the happiest I've been in a very long time. So
and that's what I know. That's what I'm talking about. So we just broke it down on both sides of it, right? Whether this is your plan, quote unquote plan, or unexpected. I think I guess I'd say like my takeaway from it all though too is being open, being mindful, being willing and able to know, what your experiences, how they have poured into you and created your perspectives, but also willing to make the shifts necessary, put in the work necessary to get your desired outcome. And also in
yes.
that same breath is that maybe your current desired outcome might not be what is your path, your journey, your end destination, and that is cool too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, I feel like we unpacked a lot, and I don't know. My brain is scattered because I just feel like it's like ping, ping. That's a
Yep.
perspective. That's a perspective. So definitely let us know different instances. They don't have to be completely related to the perspectives we brought to the table today, but share your perspectives. How do you think about different things? How do you think about the perspectives that we brought to the table, or things that you'd want us to expand on when we go live a couple Tuesdays from now? Yeah, don't forget to share, as always, like it, subscribe, because we definitely want to continue to build this. We told you in the beginning, this was a suggestion from one of our listeners, and if you are subscribed, you are going to be in the know for the What's the Word activity. Jasmine's going to hit you with that next week. And when we go live, we may be bringing in another guest to further dive into the topic about perspectives. So I'm excited.
All right, y'all. Well, we look forward to hearing from you. We'll talk next week. We will certainly see you live in 2 weeks. But that's all, folks. 19th. Put it in your calendar. All right. Peace and hair grease.